So what is the deal with the movie Saltburn? Okay, I imagine many of you have either already seen the film and have something to say about it if you have seen it, or if you haven't, you've heard of it. Okay, this is a film that, in the UK anyway, premiered for UK audiences January of this year, 2024. But it received its premiere last year at a film festival and then played to American audiences to pretty good acclaim, actually. Pretty good critically, but very good kind of commercially, because it retained a kind of low audience drop-off in the weeks that it was playing, which is a very good sign of success, particularly for a British film for American audiences. But nonetheless, it premiered this month for us UK audiences. For anyone that has Amazon Prime, you can watch it right now if you wish. So I was aware of the film last year, but only vaguely. And it was only when it started playing to UK audiences for us to consume this month that I started hearing kind of friends in my social circles talking about the film. And then when I go to work, I start hearing people who wouldn't ordinarily or necessarily talk about cinema that much. They were talking about the film. And so I was like, okay, this is a film that's getting a lot of kind of buzz and a lot of, word of mouth is key to its success. So I thought, I better watch the film. And going in, I was aware of some of I overheard snippets of conversation in reference to kind of there were certain kind of, I suppose, gross out or controversial moments, which I think is key to its, definitely key to its reception and its success, and key to, I think, its purpose as a film, its raison d'etre, as it were. So I watched the film, and a couple of weeks later, I watched it again with a friend to gauge their reaction, but also to assess if mine would change at all. And as it turns out, in between the two viewings, or as a result of the two viewings, my opinion didn't really change of the film at all. It actually kind of reinforced what I originally thought about it. And in between those two viewings, actually, because a lot of the discourse around this film, I think, is proving far more interesting than the film itself, which perhaps we can talk about a little, but in between the two viewings, I came across a comment on a thread. I can't remember where it was exactly. It may have been somewhere like Letterboxd, in which someone said, this perhaps is the first film they've ever seen in which it feels like it was made for TikTok. And I thought that was a perfect encapsulation of a very pointed observation and a perfect encapsulation, certainly, of how I feel about the film and what I think the purpose of the film is. Because, like I say, between the two viewings, I read that comment and I thought, yes, I think I kind of agree with this. And I watched it a second time, and I kind of came away thinking, do you know what? A lot of this is provocation for provocation's sake, I think. Now, I'm not against provocative cinema at all, per se. I think when done right, it's actually very vital and very necessary to cinema, to arts in general. Provocation is actually very good. But in aid of what? In order to what? What's the function of that provocation? That's the important aspect that I think we need to nail down here. So, and I've only learnt since coming across that comment, that great observation, I think, that it's actually a film that's done, I think, Saltburn related videos on TikTok have amassed over like 4 billion views. And I think that therefore justifies what I suspect is the purpose of the film. Now, the film ostensibly is about this, this geeky kid, this loner who goes to Oxford, takes his studies very, very seriously, named Oliver, who straight away notices the kind of the elephant in the room charisma that this other kid possesses, and he immediately attaches onto that and wants to be his friend. Now this kid that he notices, of course, and everyone else around him seems to be from very privileged backgrounds. Oliver is seemingly from this working class background who's worked his way up, it seems to, and takes his studies more seriously than anyone else around him. It almost feels like they're there by privilege, whereas he's earned his way to university, as it were. And he's kind of mocked because of that. He's derided because of that. Nonetheless, he does strike up with a friendship with this guy. And Then what happens over the course of the first half of the first quarter of the movie is about their friendship striking up in the confines of the university, and then off the back of some tragic news that Oliver receives, which is that his father's died, he, out of sympathy, supposedly, invites Oliver to stay at his estate, the Saltburn estate, as it were, with his family and a kind of another close friend that he has. And essentially, the rest of the film takes place in this estate, and that's where things start to happen, as it were. I won't talk about the plot too much in case anyone hasn't seen it, but I think for those of you that have, the plot's pretty memorable as such. Now, so let's talk about what I think actually you could argue that I think are the positives about the film. I think the film actually makes some interesting observations about class, perhaps. At least as the film's as the film's running along, I think it's making these interesting observations. Namely, that this working class kid, okay. What's interesting about this, of course, is that Oliver is only the subject of interest in others once his working classness is made entirely visible. So I think this film actually has a lot of things to say about how the rich perceive the working class, as well as how those that aren't the part of the upper tier, the invisible upper class of society, and how they are, how we think about them. Because it's only when he feeds the kind of the sob story about coming from like a broken home with an alcoholic mother and a father who then dies, of course, that his friend then takes a real interest in him and takes sympathy on him, as if that background story is needed to make Oliver a person of interest, a subject of interest, to then take to his family, who then take this kind of perverse interest in him, almost like being a kind of object of study, yeah? And so I think that the film has something to say perhaps about how there is this perverse gaze on the working class by the upper class. And, of course, there's a twist in the film, which, spoilers, because I will give it away now, there's a twist in the film which actually Oliver turns out to be middle class, and that his father is indeed alive and well. He doesn't come from a broken home. He actually comes from a happily married couple. He has siblings. He says he has none, but he actually has, I think, a couple of sisters, it is. And so the plot twist actually is that he's this middle class guy. And that's very important that that's put in there, because I think that adds layers to the characters, or the character of Oliver specifically, because it's basically saying that he felt pressured to make himself working class in order to be accepted into this upper social circle. So the film actually has something to say almost about and then when we then see Oliver's increasingly strange behaviour unfold, and his how much he likes the kind of social power he begins to wield, and how much he then tries to abuse it, but then we think actually he's not as smart as he thinks he is, because people always seem to actually be one step ahead of him, or do they, as there is a final twist as is revealed by the film. That actually a lot of those things actually have a lot then to say about almost like the inherent sociopathy of social mobility. I think this film has a lot to say about the desires, ambitions of those who want to become socially mobile in society, and it almost like says that that's a kind of inherent sociopathic desire, which I think is very, very interesting, and a provocative suggestion. The problem with all of this, I feel, is that it's completely undermined by two things. I think the framing device of the movie, how the movie begins and how it ends, kind of in this like awkward flashback structure, in which we see a lot of the key elements of the film quickly shown at the beginning. That's probably another spoiler. And I just think that's a very clunky framing device that you could drop entirely. You don't need it at all, okay? But it's probably in place to serve the final twist, which I think is completely hokey, and actually, if anything, undermines a lot of the prior observations and criticisms, or mainly observations of class dynamics or antagonisms, if you will, that are explored in the film. And that's when I think the true intentions of the film come to light, which is in regards to this whole, I think a lot of this is made for TikTok business, is the provocative scenes that are put in there do nothing to substantiate the characters or the plot of the film at all. I think they're completely there to be used as buzzy talking points to get people talking, to get people in to see the film. but they don't offer any. They don't provide any further proof of depth of thought, of characterization, of the development of the themes. They're literally there to provoke and or disgust a lot of people, and I just don't. That's the issue that I have. That's the main issue that I have. And like I say, the framing device I think doesn't work. And I think actually surprisingly a lot of the film's quite derivative. I think if you can actually sum up the film to a lot of people, you would say it's kind of Parasite mixed with Thomas Crown Affair, mixed with an ending, by the way, that's directly lifted from Beau Travail, which is a French film made by Claire Denis in 1999, which is now widely regarded as one of the great films of all time. Actually, it does very well in critical polls. The ending is directly lifted from there, as far as I'm concerned. Although that ending is much more kind of works and is oddly moving and profound, whereas I think here it's another kind of TikTok viral moment. And indeed, I think it has proved precisely that. So for me, I just think the film. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, because I actually think, ironically, it does work. I just don't find there's any inherent worth in a film where that's its intended purpose, to be completely honest with you. And I learned since watching it both times, I didn't really take note of who directed the film, which is probably quite odd of me, ironically, but I realised it was Emerald Fennell directed this film. Now, anyone that knows of Emerald Fennell, I believe she directed the second series of the TV series Killing Eve. But more pointedly for me, she directed Promising Young Woman. That was her first film that starred Carey Mulligan. Now, I liked Carey Mulligan in Promising Young Woman, actually. I thought she did a very good job. But I thought the film was the worst brand of reactionary feminism that you could think of. I think it's a film that really, really proved to me completely off kilter and just completely missed its target. Although again, I don't think it ever intended to be it tries to appear to be a feminist movie, I think, but it's really not. And then things start to click more with me, because I thought that's a very reactionary film, and I think this film is exactly the same. And that's a key problem that I have, is I don't have much time for reactionary films because they don't really have, ironically, much depth. Nonetheless, it's worked right. It's got us all talking about, the films, and it's received a lot of hype and publicity. And this is precisely the reason why I'm very, very suspicious of hype movies. Of movies that receive a lot of hype, that kind of break through people that wouldn't normally talk about films and wouldn't normally discuss them in a certain way. When films start doing that, I'm immediately it gets my back up a little bit. I'm immediately suspicious, because I think, okay, what is it about? Because essentially what amounts to the discussions that people are having about this generally is, oh, what did you think of that moment? Was it gross? Was it gross? Wasn't it? It was disgusting. And I think, okay, but those moments could be removed, and the film, you could remove those moments, and I think the film wouldn't be as successful. That's the problem I have. You could remove there's 3 provocative moments in the film. You could remove all 3 of them, and the film would actually, I think, function better, ironically. But I think it just wouldn't do as well with audiences at all. So, yeah, I think Emerald Fennell for me is a filmmaker that I've taken a disliking to. What's interesting about her actually is her background, is that her parents are, I think her father was he's an Etonian and a successful fashion designer or something, I think. She went to Oxford herself. She comes from a very privileged background, okay? I think something like her 18th birthday party was attended to by a few lords and baronesses and the like. So when I think, where does this film's loyalties lie? I actually think it's it's saying something that's quite harmful to kind of the working class and the middle class, if anything. I don't think it's a satire of upper class mores and the way the upper class live. I don't think it's this kind of radical thing of eat the rich, Yeah, I really don't think that's the case. I just think I think she's exploiting that kind of sentiment that people have in order to make a film that produces a lot of success and acclaim and gets a lot of hype. So I think it's kind of actually a very, very cynical movie that doesn't really have a lot of heart and soul, to be honest with you. Which is a shame, because it's actually quite well made. It's certainly a well shot film. It's a well acted film. Rosamund Pike's great in it, I think. Carey Mulligan's kind of wasted. She's only in several scenes. But yeah, those are my main thoughts on the film. I don't know what you guys think. I don't really have too much more to say about it because actually, besides talking about it in the nature of discourse, I ironically don't think it's that interesting of a film. And like I say, movies with shock twists, sometimes I think they even make or break a film. And in this case, I think they actually break and undermine, like I say, a lot of what the film could have had to say, about class, university experience, the pressures of socialization, particularly within capitalism, if you like, or class dynamics, that kind of stuff. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know what you think of the film. But for me, it's not going to be she's not going to be a filmmaker I'm going to be very excited about in the future. Let's put it that way. And Saltburn, it's not for me. But as always, take care and thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.